Hi, Fernando Gallo here with a little crash course on journalism for all of you journalism majors, advocates, or J120 students. This is going to give you everything you need to know to be able to write your first story. There's going to be a lot more that we'll cover, but as I said, this is a crash course. So we're going to jump into it pretty quickly here. We're in my Raiders gear, recording this while the game's going on. So even though I could be watching the Raiders, instead I'm recording this for you. That's actually my fault. I procrastinated. So, all journalists are procrastinators, or as Sam Amick from The Athletic says, deadline writers. It's a good way to put it. All right, so we're going to do the 5 W's and how of journalism. So here's one thing you should know about storytelling is that everything is basically a bit. It's like a comedy bit, like a sketch, like it's a gag. It's a thing that you do where you use a storytelling device to talk about a different topic. So for instance, this topic is journalism basics, a crash course. The bit that I'm doing is I'm going to explain everything to you using the 5 W's and the how. You know the 5 W's and the how, right? You remember that? Again, this is for everybody, all the journalists. What you need to know if you are writing for The Advocate or if you're going to start my news writing and digital storytelling class. So the bit that I'm doing here is I'm going to use the 5 W's and the how, the 5 W's and the H, to show you how to be a journalist. Again, how to write your first story, not how to be a professional journalist. It's a major. So you remember the 5 W's and the how. You probably heard them in English at some point. What, where, who, when, why, and how. We already said that one, right? So there's a fancy little graphic there that I took off the internet, that I stole off the internet. And listen, plagiarism, not okay. That is a cardinal sin in journalism. You will have to find a new job if you plagiarize or fabricate. So don't ever do that. But when it comes to storytelling, storytellers, directors, writers, playwrights, screenwriters, TV show actors, TV show producers and writers, everybody steals. We steal liberally from each other. I watched a documentary recently about Quentin Tarantino. I believe it's called QT8, about his first 8 movies. He's supposedly only going to make 10. And he said all directors steal. And usually we call it paying homage, that kind of stuff. He uses the word steal because the truth is, and this is about tactics, stealing ideas and tactics. When you take someone else's idea, it's like doing a cover version of someone else's song. It sounds different. It's different, and sometimes it's better. And it's even more drastic than a cover version of a song because, think about if somebody writes a 500-word article on a subject. If I told you to write 500 words on the same subject, what are the chances you write the same thing? Didn't you technically steal that idea? So when it comes to ideas, inspiration, steal liberally. Don't fabricate, don't steal quotes. But when it comes to inspiration, when it comes to storytelling, that's when we want to take from others. That's why we study great storytellers, so that we can steal from them. Again, creatively steal from them. Don't lift things. Don't copy and paste. That's not what I'm talking about, okay? All right. And if you need clarification on that, reach out to me, fgallo@contracosta.edu. All right, so let's start with the first one. The first W is what? What is journalism? Great question. A good one to start with. Well, we'll say that journalism is telling true stories. Key there. It's true. Can't make up stories. That's novelist. That's fiction. Should have gone with an English degree. You still can if you want, but that's not what we do in journalism. A lot of journalists go that way eventually, probably for money. But ultimately, what we're trying to do here is we want to tell interesting stories that are true, newsworthy stories. We deal in objective facts. We never lie. We never take sides. Right there, you'll see that is from the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics, which you can look up. If I was a media journalism teacher, I would quiz you on it. I won't, but you should take a look at it. We'll probably look at it later when we talk about ethics more in depth. But it's important to understand that journalists are supposed to have good ethics. We deal with objective fact. If we're going to be the ones dealing with fact, we have to be trustworthy. Okay, so we have to be ethical. We have to make sure that people can believe in us when we write something. The first thing that it says in the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics is seek truth and report it. I called that my personal journalistic motto when I was a reporter. I used that as the subject of my entrance essay to get into grad school at the UC Berkeley Graduate School of Journalism. Go Bears. So feel free to steal that. If you want to use that for an entrance essay, you want to write a column about that, take it. It's yours. See, that's what I mean by stealing. Take the idea. I'm not going to give you my papers. So I don't even know where it is, but I'm not going to give it to you so that you can copy it. That's not what we're talking about. But there's more to the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics. You should look into it. We'll talk about it later when we go into ethics again, like I said. But as long as you remember, seek truth and report it, you'll generally be okay. Journalism, to define it more, is the combination of two different skills, and they are different. Reporting, which is research, interviews, investigating things, putting two and two together, little detective work sometimes, and writing, which is putting it all together, being clear, being concise. And they're both important because you can't, you need material to write, so you got to do the reporting, and it's got to be correct because we deal in objective facts. But if you can't put it all together clearly, if it doesn't make sense, what was the point? What'd you do all that research for, right? You need both. Most people are generally great at one to start out with. You're probably more skilled or more comfortable with one, and then you're decent at the other. Try to be good at both. Do your best to be good at both. We will work on both, definitely. But I just want you to understand there's two different skills at play here. And it's okay if you only feel confident in one to begin with. You just know you got to work on the other one. And we do want you to work on things here. We'll talk about that in one of these next ones. Okay, so that's what journalism is. That's the first W. Second W, where do journalists work? Well, everywhere. Anywhere there is news to report, anywhere something important happens, anywhere there are interesting people, anywhere that might be of interest to your audience. So that is the main one. So journalists should be anywhere where there's interesting things to report and important newsworthy things to report. But also, we always have to keep in mind who our audience is. Journalists always have an audience in mind, a specific audience. Who is our audience here? Well, it's Contra Costa College, which means students primarily, okay? This is a college. It's for students, number one. Students are our number one audience. That's who the student newspaper is for, student news website. Number two, faculty and staff, we want to cater to them too, but just understand students are our number one. And then three is family and friends of students, because honestly, those are the main people who are going to read a lot of our stuff, are the people related to the people that we write about. And that's fine. That's part of the fun of student news, is that you write something and you publish it for public consumption and everybody sees with your name on it. You can be proud of it. You could show it to people, show it to your relatives, show it to your friends, show it to your bae. And then the people who are in it get to show other people, right? Like, hey, check me out. We'll come back to that. Think about that. All right. So if anything major happens on campus or at the college, we have to cover it. And we have to cover it quickly because this is the online news cycle now. It's not a newspaper anymore. We are going to print some things. But right now, primarily website, especially with social distancing in place. And the reason that we have to cover anything major that happens on campus is we are the news site for the college. If we don't get it, then why are we here? What is the point of us existing? We don't want that question asked. So we have to get it, all right? It's got to be a priority. If you are part of the advocate, take pride in getting things first. And just know that journalists don't like to get scooped. We don't like to be second. What's the point then, right? And that has a dark side to it too, of course, in the Twitter, social media, instant news age. People got to delete a lot of tweets. But anyways, that's for another day. All right. So that's where journalists work. Anywhere there is news to report. The next one, for who, we're going to flip it. Says who, because that's something I love to write, okay, on your papers. When you're on the clock, reporters have to be journalism robots. You have no feelings. You have no opinions. You are a referee. You are not allowed to be biased. Now, If you watch sports, you'll know some referees definitely appear to be biased. Well, there are bad journalists in the world. There are people bad at their jobs in every field, including journalism. Now, in reality, I understand you're going to have plenty of opinions, you're going to have feelings, and I want you to. I want you to be a thoughtful person. That's part of the reason to go to college, to develop good values and good thoughts. But when you are working as a reporter, as a journalist, you are not allowed to express any of your biases or your feelings in your work, and you should try your best to appear unbiased in public. Now listen, you are allowed to be a person. You're still a human being, and these lines continuously get blurred. But in journalism school, we teach objective journalism, all right? And that woman up there, Susan Rasky, she was a legendary political reporter in DC for many years, and then she was a teacher for many years at the UC Berkeley Graduate School of Journalism. I was one of her students. It was a lot of fun to work for her. She did have some wacky ideas, but she was a great lady. She passed away a few years ago. And Rasky said at the Washington Post, the reporters who covered politics were not allowed to vote by the editors, which is absurd to me. Like, that's your civic duty as a citizen to vote. So no, that's too far. But it just gives you an idea of the way that journalists try to appear unbiased and how serious that they take it. So that's you. You're a robot there. It says property of the advocates. You were not allowed to express your feelings in your work because people don't want to talk to untrustworthy, unethical, and or biased reporters. As Walter Cronkite, a legendary TV reporter, said, that's part of ethics. You recognize that you do have feelings, you do have biases, and it's fine to have those, but you don't put them in print. They don't come out in your work because you are a robot. And since you are a robot, you are not allowed to say anything without proof. You must have a source for every fact that you write, okay? Not like a term paper where you're going to say, according to this, blah, blah, blah. Usually, these sources are going to be people that we interview. Sometimes it'll be a website or a book that you found in research. And some facts aren't going to need sourcing, like the name of the president of the United States. You don't need to say, according to the U.S. government. We all know what his name is. The number of states in the U.S., where the Raiders play, which is now Las Vegas, formerly Oakland. You don't need to source that to say both of those things. Those are just facts, okay? But almost everything else that's not an obvious worldwide, United States-wide, campus-wide known fact, anything else that's not an obvious fact, you need to have a source for. Otherwise, what I'm going to write on it in your grade is, says who? Says who? Where's this come from? Says who? That's all it's going to say, and that's what it means. It means, hey, where's the source for this? You got to have a source. The second part of that I want to say, this one has 2 slides, actually, because I want to talk about interviews, and there you see a collection of different kinds of interviews with different formats. Journalism is about telling other people's stories, true stories, and we have to let them tell them. We have to let people tell their own stories as much as we can. That means you have to interview others and quote them in your stories. Every story should have at least 3 interview sources. Yes, 3 strangers that you have to talk to. I know. Take a moment. Prepare yourself for it. But just know it's okay. It's fine. Every journalist ever has done this. You'll be okay. Email interviews are highly, 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 highly discouraged, okay? Because they're not genuine. Because that person has a long time to think about what they want to say. They can say it the perfect way. And that's not what we want. We want reality. We're not trying to get people embarrassed. We're not trying to make people look dumb, but we want genuine answers. You're not likely to get that in email, okay? We want the 3 bubbles. You know, you're having a conversation sometimes. You see the 3 bubbles on an app or something on your iPhone, and you're like, oh, what are they thinking about? What are they going to say, right? And then if they don't, you're like, wait, what was it? If they told you later, oh, I was going to say this, would you believe them? You're like, I don't know. I wanted to know what you were going to say right after the 3 bubbles. What immediately were you going to say? That's what we're looking for as journalists. We want to know immediately what you were going to say when I asked you the question. I don't want you to have time to think about it and pretend you didn't see the email and blah, blah, blah. Now, in person is the best. Right now, phone is phone is always second best. But right now, it's okay if you prioritize the phone because of social distancing. But the phone is always a close second because as long as we can still get their immediate feedback, immediate response, then it's okay. The thing we don't like with email is we don't want people to have time to think about their answers and then rethink their answers and second guess their answers and change their answers. We don't want that. We want genuine responses. Okay, we want true stories and good stories. Listen, we have all had awkward interviews. Everybody. I have had lots of awkward interviews. My entire journalism career was full of awkward interviews. You will get better at it with practice. I promise that you will. We are going to have an in-depth video about it later, but you will get better. I promise that. If you can write some questions down. I always do that. Write some notes. You don't want to miss things. You should always have an idea what kind of info you want to get out of somebody in an interview. And remember that this person is probably more nervous than you are. It's true. I mean that. And you probably hear that a lot, right? With different things like, oh, they're more nervous than you or whatever. And you might not believe it, but think about this. You are the one asking the questions and they give the answers. You're going to quote them. You're not going to quote yourself. So we're going to see what they say. We'll never know what you asked them. You don't have to put that in the story. You shouldn't put it in the story. So we'll never know what you said. If you said something awkward, you said something weird, nobody's ever going to know, right? But these people that you're quoting, their stuff's going to go on the internet. It's going to be a record. So they're probably more nervous than you. Except for public officials, they're likely not. And we'll get into interviewing later. I like to go into it in depth. I don't think journalism schools teach it enough as a skill. And it is a skill. You will get better at it. You need to practice at it. Try not to be worried. And just remember, if you do an awkward interview, it's fine. Who cares? It doesn't matter. I promise it's not a big deal. None of my journalism friends have ever brought up an awkward interview to me in casual conversation. It's never been that bad where they're like, I got to tell you about this interview. We all feel a little awkward with it, and it's fine. All right, so that is the who. Says who. That's what I'm going to write on your paper if you don't have a source. All right, when is your story done? Well, when you have answered every important question. Whatever your story is about, there's going to be some critical pieces of information that we're definitely going to need. So for instance, if you did a football game, you got to have the final score. We need to know who won. I've seen student sports recaps where those kind of things were missing. And you should tell us who played well, who played poorly, top scorer, what the coach said, should get some reaction, that sort of thing. That's what we expect, right? And if you're missing one of those critical things, then there's going to be a question at the end of the article. For a city council meeting, we need to know if there was any important votes. The city council reporter needs to understand why that vote would be important. So it involves a little research, a little knowledge. That's why there are reporters who stick with certain fields, certain beats, as we call them. Get more into that later. But how, you would need to know how certain council members voted, especially if it's with or against their normal voting pattern. And if anyone said anything interesting, again, reaction. We love reaction. You love to see, something happens. And what is the first thing I do when something fun happens at a sporting event? I check Twitter to see what people are saying. People love reaction, myself included. If Apple had a tech event, we would need to know who spoke, probably Tim Cook. Maybe there was a guest, how many people attended, the purpose of the event, like were they releasing a watch or something, the products that were released, maybe the financial impact, did their stock go up, something like that. We don't know. How do you know when you have answered every important question? Well, practice is a good way to do it. Read a lot. I should have wrote that here, but I'm not going to edit it in. Let's just go with it. See, nobody cares. Read a lot. Read so that you understand when you read a story, the completeness of the information. And then when you get to the end of a news story, you don't have to read long news stories. You can read quick breaking news stories. Just go to the front page of a local news edition like the SF Gate for the SF Chronicle, the East Bay Times. East Bay Times still exists? Man, our media is so bad, but go to one of those pages, check out the story, and then at the end of the story, ask yourself, is there something that I'm wondering? Is there something that I wish the reporter would have answered? Is there a piece of information that I wish the reporter would have provided? That's what we'll want to avoid. So you practice writing stories, and then you realize later from an editor or from me, like, well, where's this piece of information? So you practice to learn or read. That's the shortcut, so you don't have to mess up. But listen, journalism and writing and creating art and videos and podcasting is all about messing up and going, dang it, and fixing it and doing better next time. I'm serious. All creative arts are like that. And that's what you're going to do as a journalist. You're going to mess up, you're going to be like, dang it, and then you're going to get better. All right, you're going to improve. But reading is a shortcut. Reading journalism is definitely a shortcut to getting better. When I was a kid, I loved to read the newspaper all the time. I was that dork. And I read the student paper at Sac State before I even wrote for it. And so I knew how to write a news article before I even wrote one, just from reading them so many times. I didn't know that I knew it. But it was a skill that I had picked up just from reading it so much. So reading is a shortcut for writing and journalism. For all art, consume whatever you're into: film, video, podcasting. Consume it as much as possible, and consume as many types as possible, because you will pick up things. Remember the stealing? That's how you steal. You look at all these different artists and you see how they do things, and you're like, I'm going to steal from this artist and this artist here, and it becomes your own thing, right? Because there are no new ideas. Humans been around for a long time, so it's okay. Consume art and use it. Consume other people's work to make your work better, right? Always ask questions of your article. Read it and be like, am I wondering something? Did I miss something? You could let somebody else read it. You could always send it to me. I'm happy to read your drafts. No problem. I'll do it. And, especially the advocate reporters, just get in touch with me. Text me something. Let me know what's up. And you might have to prod me twice if it's urgent, but I'll get back to you. I promise I'll get back to you. Bottom line, at the end of your article, if I'm wondering something, if I get to the end and I'm like, well, what about this? What happened to this guy? It's like you get to the end of a movie and you're like, but you never told us what happened with this character. Well, then you didn't do your complete job as a journalist. You want to avoid that next time, all right? So when is your story done? When you've answered every question, every important question. Why does journalism matter? Now we're to the why. A free press is one of the most important parts of a functioning democracy. The very First Amendment of the Constitution, right there, written in stone, the First Amendment includes the freedom of the press. And if a quick civics lesson for those of you that slept through history class, the Constitution was not immediately accepted. The Bill of Rights had to be added as a condition of its ratification by the colonies. And the Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. The very First Amendment enshrines 5 protections. One of them, freedom of speech, very important, and another one is freedom of the press. So remember that, okay? It was so important that before the Constitution could be ratified, the press and its freedom had to be enshrined. It had to be part of the basis of this country. So it's extremely important, okay? The Federalist Papers, which were written by the real Alexander Hamilton, as popularized in the musical Hamilton, which is excellent. Watch it. It's on Disney+. It's very good. That was activist journalism. He was writing for a purpose, to seek approval of the Constitution. And so that was a form of journalism, right? It was activist journalism, which is different. It's kind of opinion. But did you know Alexander Hamilton also founded the New York Post? I guess he was a journalist. In order to be free, our press has to be free to be able to call out the government and the powerful, which are sometimes the same, but not always. The administration of this very district, where our college is, has engaged in some unethical behavior, certain members, and people only know about that because of our stories, advocate stories, and other school newspaper stories like the Enquirer and Los Medanos. Now listen, don't get me wrong. Journalism is fun. It can be really cool to tell other people's stories, and some of us got into journalism to have a fun job. That's why I started doing it, because I was like, I enjoy this. I wanted to be a sports writer, and sports writers, while they work a lot and they do good work, they don't have to take down the powerful that much. They're not into that. But listen, others got into journalism because it matters and because it does change things. That's our main job as journalists always, is to bring attention to things that matter to our audience. We have to inform our audience, and sometimes that means we tell them things that they may not think is that interesting, but that we know is newsworthy and important. It's okay to have fun and write features and do podcasts and all that kinds of stuff. You don't have to worry about taking down the powerful with most of the articles you write. I just want you to keep in mind that service has always been a part of journalism since the very beginning. So at some point in your journalism career, try to do some good with your work. try to do some good for somebody, try to shed some light on some big issues. If I have one regret for my journalism career, is that that was not important enough to me. You know, I wasn't a jerk or anything. I wasn't selfish, but I didn't do as much service as I could have. You know, I didn't cover things with as much urgency as I could have out of duty to my readers. And I regret that. And so I always harp on it now to make sure you won't regret that. Okay. So the last one is how. Finally, at the end, how are we going to do journalism? We're going to do it professionally, we're going to do it ethically, and we're going to do it excellently. Most excellently, Bill and Ted. Now, The Advocate has a very proud history. The newsroom is full of awards. That's just some of them right there. I, though, am a very greedy advisor, and I want more, all the awards. Now, listen, I have already won awards with other students at DVC. I know what it takes. I'm ready to coach. I'm ready to get in there and coach you up. There's me at the bottom with my Inquirer students. That was in one semester, all right? But I need players. I need students who want to be better writers, better reporters, and better storytellers. I want you to want it, all right? I want you to want to be good at this. No matter what job you end up doing in your life, it might not be journalism. I promise that the skills you learn studying journalism are going to help you. They've helped me in every aspect of my life, even teaching. I mean that, 100%. You are always going to get my best. You're always going to get this level of enthusiasm and energy. And if you give me your best, well, I'm going to get you some awards. And that looks really good on an application for a transfer, application for grad school, application for a job, maybe. All right, so that's it. We did it. We got through all the W's and the H. What is journalism? It's true storytelling through reporting and writing. Two different things. You got to work on them both. Where do journalists work? Wherever our audience needs us to be. Wherever there is news to report. But our audience, remember, keep in mind your audience, all right? Says who? That's what I'm going to write if you don't have a source. Major facts, they don't need a source. Everything else does. So have a source and be ready to talk to people. It's okay if it's awkward. It's all right. You'll get better at it, I promise. When is your story done? When there are no unanswered questions. You know, remember, important questions. If I'm left wondering something at the end of your article, your story's not done. Why does journalism matter? Because we tell the people what they need to know. And part of that is knowing what they need to know, keeping track of what's going on, not doing false equivalence. There's not always a both sides to every story. A lot of times there is, but not every time. And we'll talk about that more later on when we talk about ethics and that kind of stuff. But remember, we tell people what they need to know. If there's a big story for Contra Costa College for our audience, we need to tell it. Otherwise, they're going to ask us, why are you guys here if you're not going to tell the big stories? How are we going to do journalism at Contra Costa College under advisor Fernando Gallo? We're going to do it professionally, ethically, and most excellently. I'm going to do a great job with it, okay? So that's it. That's all you need to know. You're ready. No, that's not all you need to know. But now I'm confident you could tell a journalism story on your own. I was pretty confident about it before, but some of you might have been like, I don't know what I'm doing. Well, you have an idea now, okay? So feel free to email me with more questions, fgallo@contracosta.edu. You can email me anytime with any concerns you have about any of this. And listen, it all comes down to storytelling. We tell true stories, and we tell other people's stories. So from now on, you got to remember the last thing. Also should have put this on the PowerPoint, but we'll just roll with it. Roll with the punches. Be ready to roll with the punches. That's one. It's actually two things. So roll with the punches. And number two is ABC. Remember that. Always be considering. I stole that from the film Glengarry Glen Ross, and it's not great, but it's memorable. And I still remember it, so you'll remember it. Wherever you go, think about stories. Think about true stories and interesting people that you encounter wherever you are, because that's what journalism is. Recognizing what's interesting about other people and about situations, what's newsworthy, and bringing that to the people. You know, you got to do it well. It comes back to writing, even podcasting, video, audio. You got to write a good script. You got to have good ideas. All right. So it's all storytelling. Let's become good, true storytellers. All right. Thanks a lot. Be on the lookout for other videos. Email me if you got issues. See you around.